Today, we descend into the shadowed streets of 1880 Southampton, where a brilliant inventor vanished beneath his own home, leaving behind only blueprints and a machine that should not have existed. Some say he ran, others say he was taken. But when his face reappeared years later under a different name, unveiling the world's first machine gun, the mystery only deepened. So sit back and unravel the haunting disappearance of William Cantelo. Imagine this. You walk into a brick cellar beneath your father's house. He's gone, vanished. No goodbye, no note, just a humming. A strange mechanical humming that lingers like a ghost. Then you find it, his invention. The last thing he ever built. A weapon, you think. A machine of impossible precision for the 1880s. And right beside it, nothing. Not your father. Not a clue. Just absence. Like he was erased mid-thought. Now flash forward a few years. You open a newspaper. There's a man in the photo. A traveling inventor. A genius. Unveiling a horrifying new weapon at an arms expo in the U.S. You stare at the image. It's him. It's your father. Same beard. Same posture. But there's a new name. Hiram Maxim. The man who would go on to invent the world's first portable machine gun. A man the world hails as brilliant, as a visionary, as one of the founding fathers of modern warfare. But to you, he looks like a man wearing someone else's face. So what happened to William Cantelo? A Victorian inventor, swallowed by his own creation, or murdered, replaced, and buried under a stolen legacy? What begins as a missing persons case unfolds into a hellish tapestry of identity theft, genius, paranoia, and the invention that mechanized death itself. Victorian England was a strange beast, half in love with candlelight, half obsessed with steam and steel. The 1880s, in particular, were an age bloated with contradictions. Gas lamps lit streets where blood still pooled from public floggings. Families gathered to sip tea while reading lurid newspaper tales of dismemberment and disappearances. This was a world constantly dancing between elegance and brutal efficiency. And right at the heart of that dance was invention. It was the era of the tinkerer, the self-made genius, the garage alchemist. A man with a hammer and a blueprint could rewrite his place in society, or plunge himself headfirst into madness trying. Patents were gold, secrets were currency, espionage, betrayal, and stolen ideas were as common in laboratories as they were in wars. And war was always just around the corner. You could smell it on the soot-stained breeze. And then there was England's obsession with empire, the idea that conquest wasn't just destiny, it was divine. The colonies needed taming. Rival nations needed reminding. And to do that, Britannia needed better weapons. Not swords and muskets anymore. No, something faster, something deadlier, something mechanical. Enter the arms race. Now imagine being a man with the mind to feed that hunger. A brilliant private man. One foot in the old world of clockwork and springs. The other reaching toward a terrible future. A future of bullets, automation, and endless killing. A future that could make you rich or destroy you completely. Southampton was no London, but it was bustling. An industrial port city where ideas docked alongside steamships. And somewhere, tucked behind the doors of a little shop on French Street, a man named William Cantelo was building something. Something no one had ever seen before. Something that would make even the most loyal Englishman nervous. William Cantelo wasn't supposed to be a mystery. On paper, he was perfectly average, a respectable man in a respectable town. Born around 1839 in the industrial marrow of England, Cantelo came of age in a world where mechanics were magic and engineers were gods in waistcoats. He started modestly, a shopkeeper and engineer in Southampton, but his mind was wired differently. Curious, relentless, and just a little bit off. He didn't care about fashion or parties, or keeping up appearances. He was obsessed with gears, velocities, and the idea that man could conquer chaos through invention. His shop was a laboratory in disguise, smelling of oil, sawdust, and strange ambition. At night, he'd vanish into a private workshop beneath the family home, staying up for days muttering about feed mechanisms and rifling. And still, he was a family man. He had children. He made money. He even played the organ at church. It's almost poetic. A man who built an instrument of peace in public and one of death in private. By all accounts, Cantelo wasn't unkind, just distant, focused. Imagine trying to talk to someone while they're mid-sentence with a ghost. That's what speaking with William was like when he was deep in thought, which was always, and he was on to something. In an era when even reloading a weapon was a symphony of clicks and hope, Cantelo envisioned something monstrous, a gun that fired not once, not twice, but continuously, with precision, with efficiency, a self-sustaining predator of metal and gas. Not a gun, but machine gun. He'd tell friends and family he was close, that his invention would change everything, that nations would fight to possess it, and he believed, truly believed, that it would end wars. Like most inventors of the era, he thought making weapons more terrifying would make humans more hesitant to use them. Spoiler, he was wrong. But before the mistake, before the firestorm of speculation and scandal, William Cantelo simply disappeared, walked out of his life and into legend, or was forced. One morning, William Cantelo wasn't in his workshop. That alone wasn't too unusual. He took occasional trips, short getaways, often disappearing for a few days to clear his head or seek investors. But this time felt wrong. The workshop was quiet, too quiet. The humming was gone. The basement that once throbbed with the rhythmic clank of invention was cold and still. He'd left behind no itinerary, no note, not even a word to his sons, who had begun assisting him in the workshop. The Cantelo family waited. A day passed, then two, then a week. They contacted friends, colleagues, acquaintances. Nothing. It was as if the ground had swallowed him whole. The workshop, the sacred heart of his ambition, was locked. When his sons finally forced it open, what they found was less a crime scene and more a mechanical shrine. Paper strewn across benches, schematics littered like sacred texts, and at the center, a prototype, a long, ominous thing made of brass and black iron. Something that could fire hundreds of rounds without pause. It looked like a monster born of a printing press and a cannon. Elegant, deadly, and somehow lonely, like it missed its creator. His sons knew immediately. This was it. This was the invention, the culmination of years of obsessive labor. But it wasn't finished. Not entirely. The plans were advanced, but scattered. William had likely taken some with him. If he had left by choice, he had done so in a rush, maybe a panic. And then came the rumor. A man matching William's description had been seen boarding a train, headed north. No luggage, looking dazed, talking to no one. And then silence. Not a trace, not a footprint in the snow. The police got involved, eventually, half-heartedly. They dismissed the case as a voluntary disappearance. A man gone mad with ambition, perhaps, or simply a restless soul moving on. But his sons didn't believe it. They knew their father. He was cautious, meticulous. He didn't run. He prepared. Something was deeply wrong. And then, someone asked a darker question. If his invention was as revolutionary as he claimed, who might have wanted it badly enough to make him vanish? It was a ghost story with a patent number. A man vanishes. A prototype remains. The local police? Unbothered. The community? Uneasy. But the Cantelo family? They descended into obsession. Because the deeper they dug, the stranger it got. Take this. Rumors surfaced of mysterious gentlemen seen frequenting gun exhibitions across Europe. English accent. Boastful about a new kind of weapon. Some claimed he wore disguises. Others said he used aliases. Always moving. Always alone. The Cantelo sons began following shadows. They scoured military expos, trade fairs, even American newspapers. One article in particular stopped them cold. It featured a photograph of an inventor in the U.S. named Hiram Maxim. He was showcasing a new weapon. A weapon that could fire 600 rounds per minute. A weapon that looked eerily similar to their father's designs. The Maxim Gun. Now, this wasn't a vague resemblance. This was uncanny. The features, the beard, even the posture. To the Cantelo family, this wasn't just another inventor. This was William. They showed the photo around Southampton. Friends gasped. Neighbors swore it was him. But when they contacted Hiram Maxim directly, he flatly denied any connection, denied knowing Cantelo, denied being Cantelo. End of story. Except it wasn't, because strange things began bubbling up. Records for Cantelo after his disappearance? Non-existent. No death certificate. No immigration logs. No witnesses confirming his destination. Just vapor. Yet Hiram Maxim had seemingly emerged from nowhere, an Englishman who conveniently relocated to America and invented the exact kind of weapon William had been working on. Coincidence? Conspiracy? Cosmic joke? Oh! And then there was this delightful tidbit. Hiram Maxim was notoriously secretive, paranoid, arrogant, and not above rewriting his own biography when it suited him. One moment he claimed he invented the machine gun to prevent wars. The next, he claimed he was just trying to win a pub bet. So let's review. We have a man who disappears without a trace, a weapon that appears shortly after, a doppelganger with a cloudy past and a suspiciously similar mind, and a family screaming into the void that something isn't right. What started as a disappearance was beginning to rot at the edges, becoming something uglier, something layered, something like identity theft stitched over a corpse. If there ever was a corpse, this is where the rabbit hole stops being metaphorical and starts dragging you by the ankles. Because the investigation, if you can even call it that, was a mess of denial, dead ends, and increasingly unhinged theories. And somehow, the truth kept slipping through everyone's fingers like smoke through an open window. Let's start with the basics. The Cantelo family, especially the sons, pushed hard. They hired private investigators, contacted foreign embassies, sent letters to arms manufacturers, all in pursuit of a single question. Is William alive? And is he masquerading as Hiram Maxim? Now, to be fair, Hiram Maxim did exist. He had a birth certificate. He had a backstory. Born in Maine in 1840, or so he said. But here's the kicker. A lot of his early life is suspiciously undocumented. Some of it reads like a man retroactively stitching together a legend. And he did move to England later in life, conveniently around the time Cantelo vanished. Even weirder, his own family claimed he occasionally used other names while traveling, just for convenience. They said, right, because everyone casually changes identities while showing off weapons of mass destruction. Meanwhile, the machine gun itself, the infamous Maxim Gun, was a near-perfect cousin to the prototype William left behind. Mechanically speaking, they share design principles almost too specific to ignore. Recoil operation, automatic feeding, belt-driven fire. This wasn't parallel evolution. This was plagiarism with a brass barrel. Theorists began spiraling. Maybe Cantelo sold the design to Maxim under duress. Maybe he was kidnapped and brainwashed. Maybe he suffered amnesia, woke up in America, and became Hiram Maxim without ever realizing he used to be William Cantelo. Victorian brain trauma? Stranger things have happened. Then came the darker theories, the conspiracy ones, that intelligence agents or arms dealers had made Cantelo disappear, that the military had acquired him and erased the identity, that he'd been replaced, not simply impersonated. After all, if you invented the most efficient killing machine of the century, what would you do to keep it under your control? And yet, no one in power seemed to care. The British authorities shrugged it off. The Americans offered silence. Maxim, for his part, remained a fortress of denials and ego. And the Cantelo family? They were left clutching a photo, a prototype, and a question that kept them up at night. What's more terrifying? Your father being murdered and replaced, or your father choosing to become someone else? It all should have unraveled when someone finally said out loud, what if our father didn't vanish? What if he didn't die or get taken? What if he just left? The question cracked the family open like an egg dropped on hot concrete. For years, the Cantelo sons had clung to noble delusions that their father was stolen, hidden, or killed by forces too powerful to name. But the moment they considered that William Cantelo chose to disappear, that he willingly became Hiram Maxim or someone else entirely, it rewired the entire narrative into something grotesquely personal. Not a crime, not a conspiracy, But abandonment. Imagine realizing your missing father might not be dead in a ditch or rotting in a lock cell. He might just be sitting in a silk-lined chair across the ocean, sipping tea, giving lectures, collecting royalties from a weapon he once described as humanity's last invention. This is where obsession curdled into collapse. The Cantelo sons began falling apart. They fought over photograph, over the workshop, over what was real and what was delusion. One son reportedly stood in front of the mirror, holding the Maxim photo beside his face, searching for some flaw, some inconsistency in the eyes or jawline. Another son allegedly attempted to visit Maxim in person, only to be turned away by guards and lawyers. Meanwhile, Hiram Maxim leaned harder into fame. He was knighted by Queen Victoria, dined with aristocrats, bragged to anyone who'd listened that his gun had made warfare more efficient, that he'd built peace by making death faster. He said it like a punchline, the kind you tell at dinner parties before the dessert tray arrives. And the worst part? He won. Whether or not he was William Cantelo, he became what William had always wanted to be, the face of mechanical genius, the man who gave the world its first truly modern killing machine. And Cantelo? He was reduced to a whisper, a half-chiseled gravestone with no body underneath. Somewhere around this time, the family gave up trying to prove anything. The prototype collected dust. The name Cantelo faded from military history, and the line between reality and psychological fracture blurred so completely that even we don't get to know what was true. But one final theory still lingered, so insane, so tragic, and so poetic that it deserves to be aired. Because what if Hiram Maxim wasn't impersonating William Cantelo? What if William Cantelo became Hiram Maxim on purpose? Let's pretend, just for a moment, that it happened exactly as the darkest theory suggests. William Cantelo, obsessed, brilliant, and teetering on the edge of something massive, builds a prototype. He realizes what it means, not just professionally, not just technologically, but philosophically. He's created a god, a device that reduces life and death to mere arithmetic. He panics, or he's thrilled, or both. He leaves, maybe willingly, maybe under pressure, sheds his name like old skin, reappears in America as Hiram Maxim, a man conveniently born the same year, with eerily similar talents and no consistent origin story. And just like that, he's reborn. But even if that theory were true, it changes nothing, and everything. Because the truth is, we don't know. Not really. Not conclusively. The lines are too smudged, the record's too shallow, the motive's too human. Maxim denied it all until the day he died. When confronted with the theory, he dismissed it as nonsense, romantic fantasy, he called it. The delusions of a desperate family. He offered documents, birth certificates, his own word, but his word had holes. His documents had inconsistencies. And when you peel back the polite Victorian language in his memoirs, what emerged wasn't a genius of compassion. It was a cold, calculating man. A man who once electrocuted cats in public to prove a point, who admitted to building a flying machine just to outshine his rivals, who once wrote, unironically, if one can invent a gun so terrible as to make war impossible, he will earn the gratitude of mankind. That's not gratitude. Hiram, that's hubris wearing a lab coat. Meanwhile, the Cantelo family's questions were never answered. No body was found. No death confirmed. No irrefutable evidence that William Cantelo ever lived beyond that workshop in Southampton. But also, no definitive proof that he didn't. So we're left with a paradox wrapped in a mustache. Did a man disappear, or did he mutate? Did William Cantelo become the father of modern warfare and lie about it for the rest of his life? Or did someone steal his work, his likeness, and his identity, and get away with it so thoroughly that history simply stopped caring? And how do you prove a ghost is a thief? History, being the smug librarian that it is, filed William Cantelo under curiosities and shelved him next to vanishing monks and people who spontaneously combusted. His name didn't make it into textbooks. Not officially, not prominently. He became a footnote, a haunted whisper behind the boom of the Maxim Gun. Meanwhile, Hiram Maxim cemented into legacy like a bullet into bone. The Maxim gun went on to become the first fully automatic machine gun deployed in large-scale warfare. It revolutionized how battles were fought, how borders were drawn, and how human lives were categorized into acceptable losses. It was used in colonial massacres, World War I, against tribes, against empires, a device born from industrial ambition, and left to the cold calculus of empire. And if Cantelo really was the father of this machine, then the man who vanished in a quiet English town became the accidental architect of mechanized death. The Cantelo family never recovered, emotionally or socially. They lived in the shadow of a mystery they couldn't solve and a betrayal they couldn't prove. The prototype remained in their possession for decades, a decaying relic of a dream that had gone rancid. It wasn't sold. It wasn't celebrated. It was mourned. To this day, there's no conclusive record of William Cantelo's death. No obituary. No confirmed sighting. Not even a plausible theory that isn't tangled in contradiction or soaked in speculative grief. Just a vanishing act followed by the sudden appearance of a man who profited from something suspiciously familiar. And yet, the world moved on. Governments praised the Maxim gun as a military breakthrough. Historians debated its impact with clinical detachment. People remembered Hiram Maxim not as a moral question mark, but as a technological visionary. William Cantelo, if he existed beyond that Southampton basement, was forgotten, and that, perhaps more than anything, is the final cruelty. Not that he might have been replaced, not that he might have disappeared, but that his life, his work, and his name could be stolen, and the world just shrugged. It's not just a mystery. It's an autopsy of erasure. Imagine this. A man sits alone in a workshop, grease on his hands, sparks leaping like fireflies. He believes he's about to change the world. And he's right. He does. But no one remembers his name. No statues. No medals. Just a ghost story in a family archive. That's William Cantelo, if he was even real. Or maybe he was Hiram Maxim. And this whole mystery is just a tragic tale of a man who reinvented himself and never looked back, who severed his past like a gangrenous limb so he could rise, reborn, without the weight of old allegiances. What if he burned the bridge behind him, not out of cruelty, but out of necessity? But that's the poison in this story. It's not the absence of evidence. It's the presence of just enough overlap to drive people mad. Just enough contradiction to make certainty impossible. It's like a jigsaw puzzle missing a single piece in the center, and the piece was shaped like a human soul. You want the answer to be clean. Hero or traitor, victim or villain. You want a smoking gun, a final clue, a moment where the camera zooms in and says this is the truth. But this isn't that kind of story. This is the kind of story that mocks your need for resolution. It asks, how much can a man change before he's no longer the same man? Can identity be patented? Can a father's silence become more violent than a weapon? Can a disappearing act be so perfect it warps the people left behind? And worst of all, if the world chooses the better story over the truer one, does the truth even matter anymore? So maybe the real horror isn't that William Cantelo disappeared. It's that he might never have existed in the way we think at all. Hello everyone, and thank you so much for listening. As usual, please leave any comments or feedback you may have, and I hope to see you all again in the next case.